We'll now call this meeting of the Coventry Town Council to order at 6:01 p.m. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Hillary Lima.
Here.
Kimberly Shockley. Here. Jonathan Pasqua.
Here.
Jamie LeBlanc.
Here.
Hillary Lima.
Did you say everybody's name? You said me twice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you say Jen's name?
I thought I said Jen.
Oh, okay.
Jen, I'm sorry. Jen Ludwig.
Okay.
Hillary Lima.
Yep,
Okay.
that's 3 times. Okay.
Oh, Rusty Ann took the job away from me, so.
Okay. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilman Pasqua, please lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands.
Emergency evacuation plan. We have exits at both rear of the door and exit out toward the left of the building. That's it. Okay. We'll now proceed to item C1. This is previously listed as executive session, but as discussed last night's meeting, we will be having this in the public session. All those who were interviewing were notified of the change in format. Go to the first name. First, we had Mr. Miles Provost. Hi. Yes, just come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and just tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in the commission.
All right. My name is Miles Provost. I'm from 60 Benoit Street over in Coventry. I say over in, I believe we're all in here. I have been interested in conservation and environmental science for a long time. I am currently in my junior year of my environmental science and management degree at the University of Rhode Island. I live on the Middle Dam Pond and have been working to join the Middle Dam Pond Conservation Association as well to facilitate the treatment of invasive species there. I would hope to join the commission to further conservation and environmental goals in Coventry, as I believe the local side of conservation is one that is often ignored, but deeply important in today's fast changing climate.
I'll now, if you want to just say, I'll now open it up to the rest of the council. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Provost? Councilor Ludwig?
Thank you for joining tonight. I was just curious I know the Conservation Commission hasn't met quite as regularly over the last couple of years, but have you been able to attend any other type of meetings? Are you familiar with kind of the setup and the goals of the group, or is this kind of all brand new for you?
This would be brand new. It was Tom Pendergast, who is also on the commission, when he came to us to talk about setting up the Middle Dam Pond Association. He also contacted me about this. This will be my first time in any kind of public office role, but.
Any other comments? Vice President Blank?
How long have you lived in Coventry?
We have been living here for 3 years now. We moved in 2019.
Okay. And why have you chosen now to want to get involved?
I will be frank with you and say that I did not know that there was a Conservation Commission of Coventry. As soon as I found out about it, I knew I wanted to join up.
Great. Thank you.
Any other discussion from members of the council? Do you have any questions for us?
Not at this current time, no.
Thank you for coming in tonight. We appreciate it. We are not making any appointments to Conservation Commission tonight, but the clerk's office will be in touch with you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mr. James Kuipers for the Juvenile Hearing Board. Just say your name and address for the record, please, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your history with the commission.
Sure. James Kuipers, 20 Ginger Trail in Coventry. I'm here seeking reappointment to the Juvenile Hearing Board. I've been on the board since February of 2001. So I've been there 21 years. Served as approximately as the chairperson for approximately the last 12 years. I think I sent a note that I think each of the council people received seeking reappointment, indicating that if I am reappointed, this would be my last appointment since some of my lifestyle will be changing over the next few years. So I think it's time to move on from this, unfortunately, but I would like to be reappointed for the next 3-year term. I think we have a well-balanced board right now that's in a good position to sort of hand off things over the next few years as we move forward. And I do think we have some unfinished business, some things I'd like to do with the board differently as we progress. We've done a lot so far, but still some more to do as things evolve in town.
Thank you. Any discussion? Vice President LeBlanc?
Mr. Kuipers, I just want to say thank you for your public service, your 21 years plus. You have my full support. Thanks.
Councilmember Shockley?
Hi, thank you for the note in advance, which is always helpful. I'm just wondering, in the time you've been on the board, what are some positive changes that you've seen, and what changes are you still hoping to help make over the next few years?
So I think, and positive changes, just to be clear, I think the board works well together. And I think as a team, we've done a lot to improve the board. We've restructured the interview process to make sure that we're getting everything that we need to get and getting it right. And as I think as situations have evolved over 21 years, if you go back 21 years, I tell you that I've seen very different situations back then than I do today. I think you all can appreciate some of the things we see in today's environment, in today's world. So that requires us to adapt to those things. I think by revamping how we do the interview process, we've helped in that regard. We have done some things with the school department to interact with them and to engage with them to understand better what's happening, and have them understand better what's happening and what's coming to us from the schools and how we can help the schools. We've introduced some new consequences that we can give to juveniles. Typically, it had been community service, but we now do work with the parents on getting them counseling services where we can, or ensuring that they continue counseling service. We've instituted a review process in some cases where each of the juveniles gets what's called 6 months no further trouble, or 6 months unsupervised probation. That's an automatic when they come to the hearing board. In certain cases, if we feel it's appropriate, we ask them to come back 3 months into that probation for a review, just to see if things are going better or things are improving. And if they're not, there can be further consequences. We've also instituted curfews when that's appropriate, very little used. We've also instituted situations where they do letters of apology where it's appropriate, essays, things of that nature. So we've expanded sort of our toolbox in terms of what we can do for consequences for juveniles. I think we still want to do more there, but those are some of the things we've accomplished over the years.
Thank you.
Any further? Councilman Pasqua?
Just want to reiterate what Councilman LeBlanc said. I appreciate your time on the board. And I think that this is one of those things you've been doing a good job for all these years, and it's an important part of our community. So I'm going to support you. I think we should keep that momentum.
Thank you.
Any further discussion from the council? Mr. Kuipers, do you have any questions for the council?
No questions. Just I appreciate the opportunity I've had over the time to serve here, and some of the other things I've been involved in with the town, and hope to continue this for a few more years until my retirement.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We will be making appointments for this board tonight, or we have the opportunity to anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We're running a little bit ahead of schedule. I don't know if Mr. Brian Thomas is here for an interview for the Juvenile Hearing Board. And I don't see Mr. Raposo for the Sewer Assessment Board of Review this time. I was just, Mr. Angel, might we be able to legally take the agenda out of order and talk about the land trust appointment?
Oh, sure.
While we have time?
You'd entertain a motion to take the agenda out of order and move from there.
Do I have a motion to take the agenda out of order to discuss land trust appointments while we wait?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion from Vice President LeBlanc. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilman Pasqua. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. All right. Now move to the resolution for the land trust, which is on page 6 of 9 of our packets. The applicants, just to recap for everybody for the land trust, include on page 2 of 9 of your packet, Mr. Glenn Underwood, Ms. Jenna Odell, and Melissa Jones and Robert Brennan. So we have 4, and we have 2 openings. I'll now open the floor to discussion or just hear what the pleasure of the council is at this time. Councilman Shockley.
I appreciate the discussion. I do feel that 2 of our applicants could possibly be appropriate for other boards and commissions, and both showed interest, and that would be Melissa Jones and Robert Brennan. I've met with Glenn Underwood multiple times during my time on council and really appreciate the work he has already been able to do, and would definitely support his continuing on that board. Have not met Jenna Odell as often, but have recently engaged with her a few times. And it does seem her real strengths would be here on the land trust. So I would support Glenn Underwood and Jenna Odell for the positions on land trust.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Vice President LeBlanc?
I would second Member Shockley's comments.
For Glenn Underwood, Jen Odell. Any other discussion? Councillor Ludwig?
I think I'm mostly in line with what was just said. So I'm just looking at the order, name of the applicants from 1 to 8. So I would be open to Glenn and Jenna on land trust, Melissa on conservation, Bob on Pawtucket River Authority. We have an open spot there, and he expressed sentiment for that. Jim for Juvenile Hearing Board. I'd be open to meeting with Brian Thomas before we make an actual appointment on Jenna, because I would look to have he's Juvenile Hearing Board. I thought I'm sorry, I mixed that up.
Yeah. Just the 1 through 4 are the ones for land trust we're talking about right now for that resolution.
Yeah. So let me see here. And we can get to 6, 7, 8, et cetera. So
Okay.
I think I'm mostly in line with what's been said as well.
Any further discussion? Do I hear a motion to appoint Mr. Glenn Underwood to the land trust?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it. A motion by Vice President LeBlanc, second by Councilwoman Shockley. Any discussion? Hearing none. Clerk, please take the roll.
Jonathan Pasqua, Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Hillary Lima.
Yes. 5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. The motion carries. Do I hear a motion to appoint Jenna Odell to the Coventry Land Trust?
Make the motion.
Motion by Vice President LeBlanc,
I'll second it.
second by Councilwoman Shockley. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Jonathan Pasqua,
Yes.
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Hillary Lima.
Yes. 5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. Motion carries. Let's see. We'll now move on to the resolution on page 7 of 9 for the Juvenile Hearing Board appointment. What's the pleasure of the council?
I'll make a motion to appoint Mr. Kuipers to the Juvenile Hearing Board.
Motion by Vice President LeBlanc to appoint Jim Kuipers to the Juvenile Hearing Board.
Second.
Second by Councilman Pasqua. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Jonathan Pasqua,
Yes.
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Hillary Lima.
Yes. 5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. The motion carries. Okay. Has Mr. Thomas entered the room? No. Mr. Raposo has not entered the room.
President Lima?
Yep.
Can the council at least discuss Mr. Raposo? We've interviewed him multiple times over
Sure.
the last 2 years.
Yes. Did you want to lead that off?
Yeah, I don't know if I need to make a motion for at least a discussion.
Yeah, well, I'll make a motion to, one second. Do I hear a motion to just at least open discussion, approve appointment of Anthony Raposo to the Sewer Assessment Board of Review?
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Ludwig, second by Vice President LeBlanc. Any discussion? Councilor Ludwig?
So Mr. Raposo has served on sewer subcommittee and I believe previously over the years on this the sewer assessment board as well. This is a very difficult board to get people onto. If he's putting in his request, I've worked with Mr. Raposo in the past on the subcommittee for several years. He's putting his name in for this. We've interviewed him before. I would be comfortable making the appointment to make sure any December meetings take place. And if there's a problem or anything, then, you know, we can take it from there and ask him to come back in. But at this point, he's come in multiple times over the last 2 years.
Agreed. Any other discussion? Vice President LeBlanc?
I do know Mr. Raposo. He sits on the sewers subcommittee with me. He's extremely knowledgeable with sewers. That's all he's done his entire career. I agree with Member Ludwig that I believe we can move forward with this appointment.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Jonathan Pasqua,
Yes.
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Hillary Lima.
Yes. 5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, motion carries. I believe that's all for our docket tonight. At this time, I'm just talking about for interviews. We can take the agenda out of order if those other gentlemen do, or if Mr. Thomas does come later. His time isn't until 6:30, so to D2. We'll move on to item D2, a resolution authorizing the town manager to get a property appraisal of Hopkins Elementary School and Tiogue Elementary Schools. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Councilmember Shockley,
I'll second it.
second by Vice President LeBlanc. Discussion? I'll pass the gavel here. I'm sorry. Did you want? Oh, was it? So this was an item that I had asked to be on the agenda for this evening. It's something that we had talked about at the school building committee level. Mr. Marchant got a quote from professional real estate evaluators in terms of seeking to get a true and accurate value of the properties for Hopkins Hill and Tiogue schools, as those are two properties that are being considered for closure and consolidation with the new school building committee project. And obviously the funds that we could potentially recoup from these sales could really help out the project, or be used as we've talked about the seed funds to start a capital revolving fund. Wanted to get this on the agenda tonight. I think it's pretty appropriate as well with the business we have later on the agenda. I don't know if Councilmember Shockley also has any comments. She's on the school building committee and has been in on these discussions as well.
Yes. Besides the sale of the building, I believe another way that this could prove to be a real positive for whatever project we move forward with, if it includes one of these two schools, it gives us additional percentage, I believe.
Correct. Hopkins Hill specifically,
Mhm.
if it has an FCI over 65% or just the score of 65 out of 100, then that's part of it as well. And so either way, we're going to be looking at the property. So
For $3,600, the long-term benefit could be really great.
not to mention as well, we just agreed as a council to go to or have the town manager go to RFP on a facilities master plan, which I would imagine we're going to look to get the value of the properties that the town has already in that plan. So this to me gives us a head start. Any further discussion on the resolution? What's the council's pleasure in terms of where the funds are being expended from? It says contingency funds now. I don't know if Vice President LeBlanc.
To the dollar amount, I think contingency fund is perfectly fine.
Councilmember Shockley.
I agree. I think also, I'm not positive that we could be reimbursed if it comes from COVID money. So I think the contingency would be a safer way to go.
Good idea. Any further discussion on the resolution? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Jonathan Pasqua.
Yes.
Jennifer Ludwig.
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Hillary Lima.
Yes. 5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. The motion carries. At this time, we'll now open public comment. Is there anyone present for public comment here in council chambers? Come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
James Kuipers, 20 Ginger Trail. First of all, thank you to all of you for reappointment this evening. Now that I'm back or here to stay here a while, I did want to get a point of clarification. So I think as council knows, there are 3 members, myself included, whose terms expire on December 1st, which is Thursday. Assuming the other member does not show up tonight, and I don't think we have a third person being interviewed tonight, I just want to get clarification from either the solicitor or the council. When I review the ordinance for Juvenile Hearing Board, there's a little bit of ambiguity. So I just want to get confirmation that the individuals who are serving right now, whose terms expired December 1st, do they continue to serve until somebody is named in their place, or do they no longer serve after December 1st and there's vacancies until those are either reappointed or replaced?
I'll defer to the solicitor.
Good point. There is some ambiguity. So with respect to that, the council can extend those terms until a successor is appointed. There's no prohibition against that, but you need to do it by motion. And I don't see a problem with it since it is on the agenda tonight.
Our problem solved?
Yeah, I just.
Oh, no, I didn't know if someone wanted.
Well, 2 out of 3.
Okay.
I know there was an issue with the third member being able to be in attendance tonight, so I wasn't sure how you were handling that. So that one will expire. At least that one will definitely expire before you're able to do that interview. So it sounds though like he could continue to serve until, if we were to have a meeting before.
The council just extend by motion.
Okay, so this is Brian Thomas.
This is Brian Thomas that just walked in.
Oh, he just walked in.
Earl Reed is not here tonight.
Okay, well, I think we could, after closing public comment, take the agenda out of order. We can speak to him.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any members of Zoom who would like to speak during public comments? Sorry, Mr. Houghton. Going once? Going twice? Any new members of the public who'd like to speak here in council chambers? 3 times, public comments closed. So it sounds like Mr. Thomas is here. So we can bring him forward. Mr. Thomas, do you want to come forward? Just state your name and an address for the record and talk a little bit about yourself and your work with the hearing board.
Okay. It's Brian Thomas. Address is 54 South Main Street, Coventry, Rhode Island, 02816. And I've been on the board for about 3 years now, hearing cases of various sorts, juveniles engaged in misdemeanors, offenses, and along with several other members recommending sanctions other than incarceration to try to correct them on the right path.
Thank you. Any discussion among council members for Mr. Thomas? Councilor Ludwig?
I just wanted to clarify. So you're on the board right now?
Yes.
Okay. So do you mind just telling us a little bit about how long you've served and some of your experience on the board?
I've served for about 3 years now, since November 2019. And there was a little bit of a lull in 2020 because of the pandemic. So we really didn't get into full gear until 2021. Up until the present.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Shockley? Oh.
Sorry, we usually don't do this publicly. It's becoming something that we're doing in
Yes.
public session.
Yep.
So I apologize that you're out here at the podium. But just to continue on with Councilmember Ludwig's question, are there some particular, not specific cases, but just ways that you've been able to utilize this board in order to really impact someone in a positive way?
Well, majority of the children have not returned back to the board. So I count that as a success. And just giving my opinion and my prudence as far as what we should do with each particular case. Yep. Yes, you're welcome.
Any further discussion? Vice President LeBlanc.
Just curious, why were you interested in this board? We have a lot of boards in our town.
Well, particularly deals with children. I currently work for a school system up in Woonsocket. So I have a passion for children and helping them. I also have 2 children of my own too, and I try to steer them in the right direction. And it's a way for me to give back to the community as well, particularly with children, as I just mentioned. And I also want to keep the children out of the family court system and the detention, and also prison. So, yeah.
That's great.
Yep.
Thank you. And how long have you lived in town?
Around 3 years.
Around 3? Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion? We're back to the resolution on page 7 of 9 of our packet. What is the pleasure of the council? Do I hear a motion to approve Mr. Thomas?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Motion to appoint Brian Thomas to the Juvenile Hearing Board by Vice President LeBlanc, second by Councilmember Shockley. Any discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Jonathan Pasqua,
Yes.
Jennifer Ludwig,
Yes.
Jamie LeBlanc,
Yes.
Kimberly Shockley,
Yes.
Hillary Lima.
Yes. 5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. The motion carries. We're at 6:29. Could I get a motion for a brief recess to bring up the school committee and set up for the presentation?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Vice President LeBlanc, second by Councilmember Shockley. I'm thinking just 5 minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We're in recess until 6:35 PM.
No. Sorry. I asked you. I guess I did. Not yet. I'll get the joke right back. Because I want to make sure. We have another one. I don't know if we have another one. I have ambulance. I don't think yes. Don't need air.
We're now back in session. We're starting the joint portion of our meeting. I was going to say, who am I having call Mr. Florio, can you call the roll for the school committee and open your meeting?
Okay, I'd like to open the session. Do I hear a confirmation of that? I'm opening the school committee meeting this evening for the purpose of discussing what's on our agenda. Mr. Mayor.
President.
Mr. Pearson. Here. Mr. Cambio.
Here.
And Mr. Florio's here. Do I hear yay to open the meeting?
Yay.
Yay. Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Florio.
You're welcome.
I'm going to partake in the presentation this evening with the school Superintendent Cowart and Mr. Conti from Studio J. So I'll be passing the gavel to Vice President LeBlanc to chair comment and question later by the council. Thank you. Oh, and you guys can come up, start your presentation.
You ready?
Oh, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. So we're here as a building committee. We don't have our full committee present, but they're all here in spirit. We've been meeting basically every other week since we decided as a community to resubmit a stage 1 proposal for school construction. And so we have been working diligently on a project or a variety of projects. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is to gather you all together to go through our process, to talk about our tasks that we went through, talk about what our stage 2 submission would look like, the proposed scope of work that we're going to bring forward, a brief update on what we're thinking about the financials, and then to kind of go over next steps and questions. Anything you want to add?
Slam dunk.
And Phil Conti from Studio Jade is going to be doing the majority of the presentation, and then Hillary and I will be jumping in, and Harold as well when needed. So I'm going to turn it over to Phil Conti.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here this evening. So I would like to start with the process that we have been going through. And there's really three parts to this process. The first was an analysis and a gathering of the data that we needed to make the most informed decision that we could. After we had that information, we wanted to filter it through the priorities of both the town and the school committee, and then run those scenarios through a selection criteria so that we are bringing you projects that we could define as good, better, and best. Next slide. Part of the process included gathering a lot of technical data on the properties of all of the schools, utilization, capacity, land use, the last time they were renovated, when they were constructed, et cetera. We wanted as much technical information as possible. Next slide. Then we wanted to look at the current configuration and where they are located within Coventry, visually understand what are your assets, your elementary schools in light blue, the middle school in green, and the high school in dark blue, where they are situated within Coventry, and what their projected enrollment is over the next 5 years. Next slide. Part of the criteria that we used in selecting the projects was to understand the deferred maintenance that is required at these schools, what the facility condition index is. And that facility condition index, by the way, is a ratio of the amount of money it would cost to repair as it would to replace. And currently, 2 of the schools are being re-examined for their FCI index, that is Western and Hopkins. We wanted to look at the utilization and capacity, and the school building committee conducted a number of school tours so that we had an understanding of what we had to work with. Next slide. We conducted some interactive polling, albeit it represents a very, very small sampling. Those questions did initiate a lot of good discussion, particularly focused on the appetite for bonding and indebtedness, the interest in consolidation, and maybe the recognition of savings, and what would be important to Coventry. So that was a fun exercise. I'm glad we did it, and it spurred a lot of good conversation in our meetings. Next slide. As we started to focus on consolidation and how that could look in Coventry, we looked at a number of the sites. Each of the sites we analyzed in terms of their property limits. What were the advantages and disadvantages? What were the opportunities for construction? And we looked at, obviously, the high school, the middle school, and Tiogue. And next slide. And of course, Washington Oak, Hopkins Hill, Black Rock, and Western. Some of the sites are larger than others, able to accommodate some additions and improvements. Some have what appears to be more area, but really the land is unsuitable for construction. And then the biggest landowners were at Washington Oak. Next slide. We started to investigate, could we do additions as we're looking to consolidate? For example, we looked at Black Rock. If we were to keep Black Rock, could we put an addition onto Black Rock and how that would look? What if we were to move the kids out of Hopkins Hills, demolish that building and construct a new building there? What that would look like. And we investigated the advantages and disadvantages of those. Swing space became a challenge as we were looking into those. Next slide. So a number of scenarios were developed, 9 in total, and they ranged from different grade configurations at different schools. Could we phase or have different approaches and strategies to add on to these buildings? We looked at various school closures and various combinations to satisfy the need that we had represented in an earlier stage of the RIDE process. Next slide. So those scenarios were looked through a lens of cost, scope, what's the value added of these projects? What's the feasibility of actually doing one of these projects? Do they contribute to future proofing? And what I mean by that is Coventry school needs are great. This is the beginning of a 20-year plan. They say a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and we are at the first step. We want to make sure that whatever project we move forward is a positive one. And then we also wanted to look at the opportunity for academic growth. Are there changes that could come to Coventry's curriculum with a new facility or consolidation of facilities? Next slide. The scenarios must recognize a couple things. One was to maximize the bonus incentives. It must maximize student impact. We want to protect the assets that you have in place. We wanted projects that are scalable and ones that certainly recognize the funding limits of the town. So the completed and ongoing tasks in our RIDE Stage 2 submission, the planning workshops have been completed. That's what has brought us here this evening. We have started our financial analysis, which we will present to you. Enrollment projections have been completed. We are updating facility and energy analysis. We are developing educational specifications and the design and documentation in support of the February 15th Stage 2 submission. So I want to take a moment and just explain what the Stage 2 submission is to any people who may not be familiar with that. Sometime soon, we will be coming to you with an approval to submit the Stage 2. And it's important for you to know that this approval is, the approval to submit is not an authorization to bond. It simply allows us to continue on with the process. It is necessary for consideration for reimbursement by the Rhode Island School Building Authority. And that RIDE Stage 2 submission that we will be bringing in the future will include major capital improvements. It will include minor deferred maintenance projects. And the total amount of that RIDE Stage 2 may exceed what you intend to bond. And the reason that is in the event the bond fails, we want approval on as many projects as possible so that over the next 5 years, you are eligible for reimbursement. So I want you to keep that in mind, and I'm certainly happy to answer any more technical questions about that. Hillary, Don?
Sure. So Phil had mentioned us touring buildings. We toured 3 of the 5 elementaries. Once we realized the project would most likely be an elementary project. We toured Western, we toured Hopkins Hill, but we also recognize that Hopkins Hill kind of represents what Tiogue and Black Rock look like, is they're similar designs and similar age. And then we toured Washington Oak. And one of the things that I think I realized, and I think Hillary and anybody in our committee can speak to, is almost any building we went through, we recognize need. And it's one of those things where you do the tour and you're like, oh, the project needs to be this project. And then you tour the next building. You're like, no, the project now needs to be this project. And what we realized quickly is there's a lot of needs in our community. And we needed to kind of really hone in and focus on what we need to do first. But we also have to realize as a community, this has to be the first of many steps, because there are so many needs across all our buildings that if we were to do a one and done project, we would leave a lot on the table that really needs to be improved.
And one of the biggest things that we settled on as a committee when we were really at the foundational levels of coming up with a plan was that we wanted to have an entire playbook for the next 20 years for our school buildings. It wasn't just about this one project in front of us or kind of being more short-sighted. It was really saying, what is this going to look like over the course of the next 20 years? As Phil said, the needs are so great that there were a lot of meetings where we had some sad faces because we were so overwhelmed with how much need there is and that we can't do it all in one bite at the apple, so to speak, financially. So the next couple of slides are later in this presentation that show the kind of proposed 20-year plan to address our buildings, not just in the form of large bonds, but warm, safe, and dry capital improvements. This should be the playbook, and this should be kind of our guide to follow as we assemble other school building committees over the next 20 years.
Go to the next slide. So if Hillary, what Hillary was speaking to is actually laid out here. So we talk about capital improvement campaigns. We're in the middle of one right now. If you look at what we've laid out here, we'd be thinking about doing another one in approximately 7 years. And then probably another one after that in another 5 years. Recognizing the fact that our needs are in front of us and that if we don't have a plan to attack those needs, it's going to be a project where we do one thing and then we stop. And then asset protection has to happen in between everything. And we talked about our limited funding capacity and our limited ability in the past to be able to come up with funds to address capital needs. And we've talked about creating revolving funds and creating systems so that we can address capital needs and asset protection along the way. So we're very thoughtful of trying to move this project to completion, but also laying out a plan so nobody in the community thinks that we're just trying to do one project. We're actually trying to do a whole host of projects that will make the people of Coventry, I think, proud to have their kids attend our schools.
And not to mention, the community, I think, would appreciate the fact that we're thinking more than just one project at a time. We're thinking of our buildings and our assets over the next 2 decades. And that's something that we're starting to get deeper into as we talk about the bond debt schedule and payment. And, you know, we're talking with Mario Carreño from RIDE about what other communities are doing in terms of making sure that they're funding their capital projects and not at a huge burden to the tax base. You know, Don just mentioned a capital revolving fund, which is a fund where we could deposit seed money from maybe for example, the town of Lincoln has done so with the sale of a piece of property. And they use that money in the asset protection years or off years from capital improvement campaigns to work with the state and their reimbursement and matching funds to do projects in their school buildings. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to not have to reinvent the wheel and just do what other communities are already doing to make sure they're funding capital projects for their schools going forward.
Next slide. So we're very, very aware, this building committee was very aware of the limitations that we had, but we wanted to go through the process with fidelity. And we ended up coming up with scenarios and looking at, you know, what each scenario means in terms of a dollar amount and the impact on our schools. So we came up with a scenario that was a good scenario, which does some asset protection work. And it's a minimal bonus. We don't get the full 20 points, 20 percentage points on a project like this. A better one, which is where we sort of landed, is in the range of up to $85 million. It's good. It also allows us to consolidate and allows us to maximize the bonus percentage potential that we have in front of us. And then obviously this may be outside of our price range, but we wanted the committees to know we also looked at, you know, if we had additional funding on top of that, what else we could possibly do, which obviously would really look at our middle school again, because our initial capital campaign was a middle school project. And just because that campaign didn't go all the way to the end doesn't mean those needs have gone away. And so we need to address those at some point.
Don summed it up really well, but I do want to just make a comment and give kudos to my fellow school building committee members. They heard this town council loud and clear when echoing sentiments of not wanting to hit the ceiling in terms of our bond debt capacity with this project. And I think what helps in terms of doing what's I guess we could say better in terms of a first step in a project is knowing that we have a 20-year plan behind it, that this investment is a part of a coordinated effort across time. And you know, there's no kind of unknown of when we're ever going to invest in schools again. We have this plan and we know, and not to mention be also realizing that we're more than just the school district, we're, you know, the whole town, and we're talking about a facilities assessment plan and master planning. We've talked about, you know, ARPA funds and our infrastructure as well. So I'm happy to be a part of a committee that understands holistically the great need we've had because of such prolonged deferment and maintenance for our infrastructure in town.
And one of the things that we were really ultra aware of is the project that we're doing now, and knowing that we had a 20-year plan and knowing where we wanted to be, we even the project that Phil's going to present to you has room to grow, so that it's not a building that is, once it's done and constructed, that's it. We actually are building a building that we think in a number of years on the next capital campaign, we could expand that building and maybe fold in another building into it, you know, close another smaller building and bring another one in. So we're trying to be really strategic with our decision making in terms of our design, but also looking at what we need to do in years ahead.
Next slide. Great, thank you. So I'm going to present 4 pieces to the proposed scope of work. The first is to consolidate Hopkins Hill and Tiogue into a new 675 student elementary school, expandable to 1,000 at Flat River Road, which is across the street, your former middle school. There was another site that was discussed, but the timing associated with that, procurement and et cetera, would likely not work within the timeline that we're looking towards. Next slide. So this is basically a new build, PK to 5, designed to accept Black Rock in the next phase. Next slide. This is just a very conceptual rendering of the school on the site, as well as just a bird's eye view of that particular location. We would like to plan this building at 675, expandable to 1,000 for Black Rock in the future. Next slide. So as we start working through the RIDE worksheet and their formula for the size of a building based on enrollment, I would like us to try to request an additional 5,000 square feet so that we could make some of those core spaces larger now to accept the additional students in the future, for example, the cafeteria and other support spaces. We may not be successful with that request, but I would suggest that we pursue that with the school building authority. Next slide. When we use their formula, there is a cost per square foot that is eligible for reimbursement. Currently, that cost is $499. We do anticipate that to increase. The 530 may not be the final number. As soon as we know that final number, we will put it in, but it'll probably be around there. When we multiply that by the requested square footage, we come up with a dollar amount, and added to that are other items such as furniture, fixtures and equipment, technology, the cost to demolish that building, making a RIDE request for reimbursement of about $60 million for the new elementary school. That is the first part. The second part is what we're calling high priority facility improvements. That is the building envelope at the middle school. That is the fire suppression system at the high school. That's the domestic water service and well at Western. Next slide. We're estimating right now that scope of work for those 3 projects to be about $10 million. Next slide. The third part is a facility equity initiative. It's a competitive grant that the Coventry Public Schools will be submitting tomorrow on. And that includes a number of projects that fit into those categories established by RIDE. They include high school auditorium improvements, high school lab improvements, high school gymnasium and fitness renovations, and select restrooms at the middle school. Next slide. And that is a grant that we would be responsible for the local share of about $5 million. That is a competitive grant, so we will see how we fare with that after the submission this week. The fourth category is what we're calling other projects, district-wide deferred maintenance, and what I'm calling other project costs. District-wide deferred maintenance, for example, your newest school, Washington Oak, is over 20 years old. There are probably some things there that need to be corrected. And there are other improvements that you may want to execute within the district. Next slide. We're projecting that at about $10 million. I have included what I call market pressure money, which is not eligible for reimbursement. And we can talk about that further, but we want to be conservative and prudent in our approach. And right now, construction costs, even with an increase in the RIDE reimbursement, are outpacing that. And what we don't want to do is you have a project that you may not be able to fund. So we've included that in here for $10 million. Next slide. Giving the total project amount of $85 million broken out in those categories. Don, Hillary?
I just want to go backwards for 1 second. When Phil mentioned the high priority maintenance projects, I just want to make sure that everybody's fully aware of what those are. So we've discovered that our roof at the middle school is in dire need of replacement. It's probably has less than 18 months before it needs to go. We're very lucky that actually the roof that's there now is built over another roof. And if there wasn't a second roof underneath, we'd probably have worse problems. But because there's a second roof, we don't have the massive leaking that we could be having, because the material they used is literally cracking like glass. It's just not pliable, and it's not even what they use in that kind of construction anymore. Fire suppression as sprinklers at the high school. We had the state fire marshal come through the high school in Washington Oak, and they discovered a number of deficiencies, and almost every one of them gets corrected with sprinkler system. So about 70% of that building has sprinklers, so the rest of it needs to be completed. And then the domestic water service, Western, is the well. And I think many people know, and if you don't know, the water coming out of the well is discolored. We use water bottles there for kids to get drinks, and it's needed replacement for a long time. We've done a lot of things to try to make it work. We've cleaned it. We've changed the filter. We've done lots of things, but the reality is we need another well.
And just before we move on, if we go back to the proposed scope of work, page 3, the improvements that primarily are at the high school, and then the select restroom renovations at the middle school. For that grant money specifically, I believe it's mostly the facility equity grant money. We're one of only 8 school districts in the state who are eligible for the funding that's open this year. So obviously our opportunity is greater to get a good chunk of that funding. And reimbursement is favorable for the town there in terms of our matching. So I look forward to seeing how we fare there in our application. And of course, some of these projects, I do believe, and Don can correct me, lend to accreditation, which is super important as well.
Correct. Our part of our plan with that grant was to also put in spaces that are community spaces. So the gym is a space that's used by the community. So you actually get more kind of bonus points for that. You get a better opportunity to get it. And then our auditorium is also a space that's used throughout the community. So we feel like if we're able to renovate those spaces using this grant, not only will we improve the experience, not of our students, but also the community, but I also think it becomes a place where there's some pride. You know, we bring in other teams into our gymnasium to play games. We bring the whole school together. We often bring the community into our auditorium. If there's a way to make those look better and more inviting, I think it will present more pride in our community. All right. So in terms of impact, we're on the right one. So in terms of educational impact, one of the things I wanted to mention, yes. Okay. We can pause.
Member Ludwig?
I just don't want to go all the way to the end and be like, I have a question on page 3.
Yeah, I get it.
So I just have I have a couple of things. So when you highlight 1, 2, 3, and 4, they're distinct pieces of work, but this is one entire amount that we're looking at.
This is the capital bond.
So, okay. So consolidating 2 of the elementary schools, have you had any discussion? I know this was back in the spring. We had, I think it was some sort of state funding that was coming in, like $900,000 for safety. That was going to be coming in. So have we thought about what to redirect that to? I mean, groundwater is, it's awful, right? So I'm just wondering, what are we going to do with the $900K?
Yep. So what we did is we had an increase in state aid of about $900,000, and we dedicated that $900,000 towards safety improvements. The 2 big projects that basically that paid for were new doors. There were a number of doors throughout the district that were just not appropriate. You know, they were the wrong kind of doors. They were rotting. They weren't sitting the right way in the jams. They just were not good. And so doors and then security systems, cameras for the most part. So our high school and our middle school are done, but our elementary schools, we wanted to outfit those schools with cameras. So we did have a conversation on the school side about, you know, when we do a project and we're looking at about closing and consolidating, you know, what can we save from those improvements? If there's an opportunity to take some of those doors and move them, we will. And we can relocate cameras to a different location. The only loss would be in labor and wires, which, it's safety being a priority. We'd rather have everything in place and safe for the time being until the project's over, and then we'll worry about moving any hardware or doors to another location.
Okay, that's helpful to know, because by putting this at the proposed location, that also displaces people at the annex, right? The current school facilities.
Yeah, we're getting
and we're
there.
going to have
That's
to
what
look
our
at.
next
Yeah.
point was, yeah.
Okay. I had one other thing. I don't have page numbers on mine. Proposed scope of work number 1. It has the map on it. It says alternate site in orange or a yellow.
Mhm.
Was that the one that Miss so sorry, Phil, I can't remember your last name. Mr. Phil said.
So that alternate site that was discussed was potentially the, in Rhode Island terms, the old Almac site, Kmart, where Burger King is, next to the old Walmart, now Job
Okay, so
Lot.
that was just discussed.
It was
but-
discussed, but the work that would have to go in to possibly get that into the town's possession would require negotiating with the current owner of that land, who I believe is Stop and Shop. We'd have to start negotiation on how we would get the property from them. There might be terms or legalities we have to agree to with them. I would imagine the reason they bought the property is to stop any other markets from competing with them there. Just a guess. And given how tight the timeline is, it just felt like, yes.
Got it.
And then there was also safety concerns too. That's a really busy road to have an elementary school set up on. And it also had less buildable land behind it. I believe it was a lot of wetland behind. So not as optimal in terms of safety and buildability. I'm making up a word. Okay.
Okay, I had 2 other quick things. So when we're talking about the RIDE Stage 2 submission, about approval to submit is not authorization to bond. I just want to be very careful here, because we went down this rabbit hole, what was it, 18 months ago, and everyone was, in my opinion, hunky-dory, just saying, oh, this isn't the amount. We're just approving like the concept and everything coming through here. And then people got very upset at the end when the actual numbers and everything were coming out. So I would love to hear how we can make sure that I saw one slide earlier with the 85 million number on it. How can we keep that number at the front at all times? Because while I recognize submitting this on stage 2 is not authorization to bond, I recognize that we got into trouble here last time, and I would rather be on the same page with everyone the entire time through.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you have any recommendations there on that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think at this point, I think that number is what we're kind of settling around. We haven't voted on anything. A lot of the conversation we're having at the school building committee level is more about where we're moving the puzzle pieces, if you will. Whether it's putting more towards the elementary school piece, whether it's putting more towards the middle school, whether it's putting more into the deferred maintenance pieces or the high priority items. That's kind of where we're at this point. I do agree with you. And I think part of the whole reason we decided to have this preliminary meeting tonight was to start getting this information out and getting everybody used to it here. But I do agree that's a good point to start kicking it up front. But I think for just tonight's purposes, we wanted to show how Goldilocks arrived at her option. So to speak.
Yeah, it's 100% the purpose of this meeting, right? To give you as much information as we can as early as possible, so there are no surprises. But I don't want to also lose track of what Phil said earlier. if we have projects that we want to do in the next 5 years, they have to be part of our stage 2 proposal. So when we put that proposal in, we're going to put everything in the kitchen sink in there. Even if it doesn't land on this bond, it's going to be in there, because if later on when we get, I pointed to the slide about asset protection and capital campaigns, if there's a project that we want to work on, if it's not in the stage 2, we're not going to get the reimbursement that the state provides. So we're going to really pack in that stage 2 proposal, even though not every project in that document will be in this bond.
But to Councilor Ludwig's point, we do need to make sure we delineate what's really the real deal and what is packed in there for the stage 2 and looking ahead to the whole 20-year plan.
Yeah, that's essentially why I brought it up, because I don't want anyone to think that we're telling you one thing today, but then when stage 2 is put in, we put in a lot of other stuff and we're trying to pad something. It's really, we're trying to make sure that we set ourselves up for success in the future.
Because like Phil had said, if we are settled on a plan to eventually add additions on to bring BlackRock in, we have to build this new school in a very particular way. And it requires more square footage that we normally would be reimbursed for. But if we can dazzle Mario at RIDE to say that we're going to eventually do this, then that's how we can get reimbursed for that later when we do go to do that addition.
I do want to say thank you. I think I made a comment, this probably about a month or two ago, about possibly just having a tough time with only looking at improvements to 2 specific or 3 specific elementary schools without a plan for anything else. So I do want to thank you for having the committee look at everything, having a broader plan that makes it an easier sell, for example, to some of the districts that don't get a brand new middle school, but eventually also get upgrades as a part of the overall plan. So thank you.
I do have to say, and I would invite members of the public when possible to do so. I had a lot of preconceived notions about Washington Oak. I figured it's the newest school. It's only 20 years old. And when we went in there, I was shocked. Not that it's in awful condition, but it's like you can already see that this needs maintenance, or it's on a path toward, what we're talking about now with the other buildings of the BlackRock, Tiogue, Hopkins Hill age. So, I do want to bring that up for the public to understand that 20 years old for a building, it doesn't mean it's without its issues. The education industry has evolved rapidly, and you can see that in just Washington Oak about how the spaces that were developed in the concept for that time, while still does serve that school and those grades mostly, there's still room for improvement and need in terms of addressing other pieces such as therapy and behavioral and special education.
It's actually a nice segue. Can I keep going?
Hang on one second, please. Member Shockley, I saw your hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, for the portion of the plan where $5 million is allocated from the bond, how many dollars worth of work would that be doing? Because you said that a grant is going to be paying off the rest.
And actually that number is going to be adjusted because of a number of reasons. So we put in an application with a proposal with a priority list. It doesn't mean we're getting all of those. It just says 100%. This is what we'd like to have. So the first thing is, what do we get? And then the second part is we actually have to bond our reimbursement part of it. So that number is most likely going to be less. It's just a placeholder for the moment. We're at a level now where we just need to make sure we don't lose track of things. So if we come in at 5 million, we only have to bond for the part. And I asked Mario this, we actually had a call. We only have to bond for our portion of the reimbursement. So it's going to be less than 5 million. Did that answer your question? I hope.
Not 100%.
All right. Well,
because you listed 4 actual items here.
So those it's actually 5. The fitness center and gym are 2 different ones.
Okay. If we did those 4 projects without the grant money, how much would it cost?
$5 million.
Okay.
So this is what you're saying, a conservative estimate for our share.
Mm-hmm.
This is without us having no insight into what we're going to get from our application for that grant that only 8 districts are able to apply for this year or the coming year.
Member Pasqua.
I'm going to refer back to the high priority improvements. One of them I'm looking at and your estimate on this, the domestic water service, the well at Western Coventry, it's coming in at 2 million. To me, just looking at that, I think that's really high for just drilling a well and dealing with some of the issues there. And so to piggyback that, where are those numbers actually coming from? Do you have an outside company that came in and said, this is the cost to repair this and bring this up to code and make the water safe and so on and so forth?
So it's an estimate based on similar projects of a similar type. If we got to that point, then we would bring it, be a whole RFP process, and we'd bring in folks to bid on it. But that's the ballpark. I want to say the last time we looked at that project was a few years back, and I think it was like 1.5 when we actually got proposal.
I think correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but I think part of the reason it's so high too is number one, we're going to need to drill deeper and push the well down further or add more to it. And I think it has something to do with we have to replace the material that is the actual well.
Right. So there's, a few things. So that property is tricky. And much of the surrounding side and back is leach fields. So those are not drillable. So the well itself actually sits at the front of that property, and the tank is a metal tank, which is part of the discoloration problem. And so when we drill the well, it's not just about drilling the well, and you're right, it does have to go deeper, but it's also replacing the tanks and the lines that are connected to the well. So when the water gets delivered, we have fresh, clean water coming out of the ground, but if we're putting it into a metal tank that's causing discoloration, we haven't really solved our problem. So we have to replace the veins and the guts.
And that's part of the conversation we had too when we visited Western in terms of its potential to be part of any capital project. Where the building is literally only where it can be on that property because it's surrounded by leach fields or the well on one side. So the ability to build on other pieces of the property is virtually impossible.
Okay.
School committee member Florio, do you want to ask your members if they have any questions at this time?
Does anyone have any questions? Sure.
This may be a very elementary question, but when Mrs. Lima just mentioned that at Washington Oak, it's not that old of a building and it's already, oh my goodness, obviously that's due to non-maintenance. And so my question is, first of all, this whole thing thus far looks very, very exciting to have all these shiny new buildings and ability to grow over the next 20 years. In the total cost, is there maintenance funding to keep these buildings up to par, like over the next year and a half, 2 years, 5 years? Is that what asset protection is talking about?
So it's a combination of a few things. So it's there's not poor maintenance in the building in the sense of like we haven't kept it up. I think it's at an age where things are going to need to be replaced. Like I just replaced my roof, not because I didn't take care of it. It's at that point it needs to be done. So that's sort of where we're at Washington Oak. The building itself is well maintained. There's two different ways to fund the maintenance. One is sort of what we've thought about with this revolving fund and capital project lists and addressing our needs. But the other thing is the state also has required a percentage of our operating budget to be towards capital. So we have a requirement to the state to maintain our facility. So when we build this new building, knock on wood, and any building we build in the next 15 to 20 years, it's our requirement to maintain those buildings.
Thank you.
So if I can segue a little bit into the educational thing, one of the things that I was able to do, and Russ Hill, our facilities director, came with me, is we went to Cranston and we toured two buildings in Cranston. One was Garden City, which is fully under construction, but we were able to walk the whole building. And then one was Eden Park, which is a building that is being renovated by sections. And it's a whole different educational model. Not to say what we're doing is bad, but it's not always the best use of space. So if you walk through most elementary schools, you're probably going to see kids in the hallways, teachers in the hallways, people pulled into every nook and cranny of that building, working with kids, working with children. In the new designs, hallway space is considered wasted space. And so what they do is we create almost like a pod model. So when you walk into a learning space, every inch of that environment is learning. There's big meeting areas, there's small meeting areas, there's classroom spaces, but it's all flexible. And so with the new curriculum that we've been bringing in over the last few years, and knowing where we're moving into a more personalized learning experience for kids, we want to have a learning environment that allows teachers to have flexibility and to use the space to its fullest capacity. So even though we're designing a building and Phil's looking at the square footage, not a lot of that square footage in this new building construction is hallway space. Very little. It's a pod model where once you step into a learning zone, it's every inch is learning environment. And then operational savings, we're looking at, things like what we spend on utilities, what we spend for busing, what we have in terms of our grade level configuration. When you consolidate two schools into one, it doesn't mean we eliminate a whole bunch of classrooms. I mean, there could be some consolidation with classrooms, but a lot of the savings is going to be in what we spend on utilities and busing and some of the other things that are connected to how we operate a school building. And then obviously, we're always looking at opportunities to create revenue sources. And that's why we had also mentioned this capital revolving fund.
And then just as we started to talk about before with relation to Councillor Ludwig's point, we do recognize and we want to be completely transparent about the challenges that this particular plan represents. We do have a number of offices and services located across the street at the proposed site. We have the school department's central office. We have the bus depot for the entire town. And I believe their source for gasoline or diesel for those propane as well. We have town offices over there. We have police offices, EMA. We have the teen center. We have the community garden. So we do have to, with this plan, assess what is going to happen with those buildings. Luckily, we are starting the process of the facilities master plan. So that will help us in doing this, not just in a way where we're rushing to put these people somewhere in town, but smartly and maybe their permanent new homes. So to me, I think this is a positive. It's kind of pushing the town to do something it should have done probably a long time ago, and get these offices and these services and maybe spaces that might better suit them. So I look forward to that opportunity. And we do have time for this. Even if we don't have everything completely solved by the time this gets hopefully approved by voters. Phil, when would shovels be in the ground, just to know how much time we have to house or when would demo happen, I guess? What year?
2024, summer, fall, 2024.
Okay. So we did want to be transparent about the challenges that this does present and we need to think about.
So I do want to take a moment just to talk about the incentives and the reimbursement. So Coventry's base reimbursement rate right now is 49.2%. And the list of the projects that we have put together do qualify for all four, likely will qualify for all four bonus incentives. The last being the facility condition index, which is currently being redone now. That would bring your reimbursement rate up to 69.2%. Next slide. So obviously before interest, if we wanted to look at an $85 million project value, almost 60 million is state share and about 26 would be the local impact. Next slide. So if the anticipated total project amount is 85 million, what are the strategies to reduce that project amount? For example, the use of pay-go or grant funding. Right now, we're holding approximately 8 million. If you were to issue a bond for maybe 75 million and you were fortunate enough to recognize some premium, let's say 5%, that may be another 3.25 million. If you wanted to generate revenue from a land sale of either Hopkins or Tiogue, they're both about the same size, estimated $25,000 an acre, that may be another 250,000, which could bring the estimated project amount to about 73.5 million, which is why I used a $75 million bond. Next slide. That being said, I would suggest that you seek voter approval for up to 85 million in the bond sale. Although you may bond for less, it would avoid public confusion because we are going to be talking about an $85 million project that includes those 4 items in some capacity. Harold?
Good evening. I want to thank Ms. Mills for getting the bond council information quickly to us. If you notice on the scenario number 3, the $85 million project, you'll see the state share base is 50%, which is the 49.2. Then you also have the state aid ratio with bonus of the 20%, bringing it up to 70%. These were done quickly, so they're not absolutely accurate, and we don't have the project in place yet. So this is just to give you an idea of where we stand on that. And then total aid, which is 88, that's state aid coming in, is the 78 million plus the pay-go of 9 million. So your full state aid benefit here is 88 million. The full reimbursement on this is 78, and the 9 gives you the full state aid of 88 million. Bond amount, because of the pay-go amount, would be 75 million or 76 to be on the safer side. The interest rate on this would be 4.5%. The cost, the most important part of this whole process, is what is going to be the net debt service to the town. And the net debt service to the town is going to be about $1.964 million a year. And that would be the last column on the third scenario where it says net debt service. And that would be the annual amount that we would have to make sure is funded. Yes. Gross debt? Yeah, the gross debt. Well, yes, the gross debt on an annualized basis is the principal and the interest added together. The state aid, which is the number in parentheses, is what the state will be providing for. Just want to make sure that you understand that. And what the town or what the town of Coventry would have to pay on a net debt service amount would be the 1.964 million. On an annualized basis. Yes.
Member Shockley?
So the 4.5%, is that a number that seems plausible in this rate environment, or?
That this came directly from bond counsel for the town. This wasn't made up. This is bond counsel for the town developed this, and based off what the rates are at this present time, which is 4.5%.
Yeah.
It could be higher by the time we go to bond, but at this point right now, we're looking at 4.5%.
Yeah. I could just expand on that a little bit. That's totally correct what Mr. Sand said. Originally, they were expecting our bond rate to be about 5.25, but it's 4.5. And the bond market, as everyone knows, is very much fluctuating. So, but the good news, it went down. So our rate went down. So that's great.
Thanks. So we're at the end, and our next steps, and obviously we'll take any additional questions, is we need to get feedback from you folks. We need to get feedback from our school building committee, fine tune our proposal, make adjustments where necessary. We need to work on our stage 2 application. That does require a vote from the school and from the town to submit the application, and that's due in February. And that's a project that Phil will be working on. And then we have to worry about how we engage our community, right? How do we get people to understand what we're trying to accomplish here, what we want to do, how it benefits our community as a whole, and how they craft a message that lets them know that this is value added, right? We're improving Coventry. And this is not part of our presentation, but I've said this before, and it's something that Luke Murray and I have talked about many times as well, is this money has been approved at the state level. Coventry taxpayers are paying for the bonds in all the communities that are doing construction. For us not to take advantage of that opportunity would be a chance to improve what our kids get here in Coventry.
And I just want to be very clear. Please, I know this is a lot to dump on everybody tonight. You just got this in your hands, but please provide feedback. Please send it via email to the school building committee or to, to Don or to Mr. Marchant to pass along to the school building committee. This isn't just the school building committee's project. This isn't just the school district's project. This isn't just the town. This is everybody's project. So we want a project that everybody can be proud of, that everybody can be confident in, that everybody has buy-in, and not just about this project, but also for the future of capital improvement for the entire school district.
And I think it's important because something Hillary just said made me think. The school building committee is a very strong committee and well represented, and I don't want people to lose focus of that. We have a number of town council members on there, past and present. We have school committee members on there. We have both the manager and the finance director from the town side there. I'm part of the committee. Harold's part of the committee. We have educators from the state level, from our level. We have 2 people in the school construction industry who are project managers. We have a really, really well-rounded group of people. So when Phil, obviously, who's been our captain of the ship in terms of helping us fine tune our project, is involved in projects in a number of different communities. So he is well versed in what's required. So between the members of the committee and Phil, I feel like what we're bringing forward to you is been well thought out and, definitely worth the consideration of the people on the 2 committees and then also in the community.
Councilmember Ludwig.
So I do want to recognize there was an absolutely stellar group last year. And I know there's also a stellar group this year. I know a lot of people are working really hard. And I don't want to keep bringing up the past, but I just want to learn from it. And really, when it came down to it, and the feedback that I remember that we heard towards the end, towards voting process, this really came down to what is the cost? What does it cover? What type of possible increases might we need to look at for residents over the next so many years to cover the bond? What percentage of this is, of our overall credit? So I personally would like to see some type of, now that you have the number, the 85, I would like to see some of those questions answered so that we have a good understanding here before we just say, this is it, this is the project, we're going to push this forward, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
That would be very helpful for me.
And that's completely part of the plan and on the table. We want to be extremely transparent. We've even talked about going so deep to show the impact to the individual taxpayer, what it would look like for the tax levy impact as well. So that's totally part of the plan. And it's not a shock to hear that this council and the community would want to see that.
Any other town council members have questions? Member Pasqua?
So I'm looking at the 20-year plan, and I see multiple points where capital improvement campaign in 2030, capital improvement campaign in 2035. Does this bond include any funding towards those? Do we have any idea what those would be?
We have an idea what they would be. From touring the buildings, looking at our own capital improvement projects, knowing what we have on hand, we have an idea what the projects will be. But what we're bonding for, what we're asking for this time around is the new construction of the elementary school, the high important improvements like the roof, the sprinklers, the well, and then some of the smaller maintenance, safe, dry, and warm items that need to be addressed immediately. But the bulk of this project is really going towards the construction of a new elementary school.
But part of the idea too would be in the asset protection efforts section. So those schools that maybe didn't get the bulk of the attention with this capital improvement project would get some. If we did want to take Black Rock and consolidate it into this new build eventually, the needs of that building don't go away. So we need to calculate how much of an investment we want to make to keep that school warm, safe, and dry for them until that time comes. Western is also on the FCI reevaluation to see what their score is. We talked about earlier tonight. The Hopkins Hill and Western are both on that to see if they get over the 65, which would lend itself to the reimbursements, which we talked about tonight. So in those off years beyond the capital bond, that's where you look at the maintenance requirement with the school and the capital and funds there. You look at the use of the capital revolving fund that it would be prudent to establish at the town level. And then there's also every single year, there's opportunities for reimbursement and matching funds with the state.
Member Shockley?
Another thing that I feel would be really prudent to put forth before the town council and school committee are other funding projects that the state is working on right now, similar to the grants that we're applying for as part of this bond. I know more than one person has asked about how to be able to upkeep these buildings over time. And I think that the state providing further services is something that really needs to be discussed. I also think that we have to factor in that this year we were able to bake in about $500,000 to the capital budget for the school. If this bond went forward, we could more slowly build on that and be able to use a portion of that for the upkeep or other projects for these buildings. And possibly because of how those funds are held in the years where we're putting a lot of money into our schools, possibly utilize some more of those funds for town projects as well. Part of this project even is moving buildings around, moving people, moving public facilities. So these other funding sources that either we have or the state is making available, I think would be an important part of saying, we're not just doing this project, we're going to be able to maintain some things over time.
Cody, do you mind going to the slide that says proposed scope of work? It has the scenario values of good, better, and best. Is that possible? Just for the public. It has 65 as good, 85 as better, and 105 as best. Thank you, Cody. My question on this slide, first, I want to let the public know that this slide is excluding the interest component. That is a very significant expenditure to the town. My question is, what is the local share for the good, the better, and the best? Do we have that information?
I think Phil could chime in, but I will tell you that for the better and best, it maximizes the reimbursement bonus. So it's that 69.2 that we roll up to the 70.
Got it.
Just for simple math purposes.
Good only got two bonuses, I believe.
Right. So our base rate is 49.2. And then if we got two bonuses, that's 10% more. So that would put us at 52.59, which was actually the reimbursement that we had on the middle school project that we were proposing last time around. So this project is got the capacity giving us 10 percentage points more in terms of the state reimbursement.
Right. I just wanted to ask because I knew there was different reimbursement amounts.
And then we're calling out the interest piece. I know in another slide, we made sure to have Phil put the asterisk about not including interest. We forgot to do that on the slide.
And that's also why it was very important for us to put up that the bond council slide, because we wanted people to know that even though it's a 70-30 simple math split, it's not going to be a 70-30 split when it comes time to pay for it because we have to pay interest.
Correct.
This state is still providing a big portion of reimbursement, hard to leave on the table, but we don't want to give anybody any misconceptions.
Understood. Member Florio, do you want to ask your members if they have any questions?
Mr. Mayor, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
it's been previously mentioned that there might be some town bonds falling off around the same time as this would be coming on board. I just didn't know if would be a good idea just to think about maybe what the impact is to the taxpayer, like as an aggregate. I don't know if that would be worth as a selling point to the taxpayers moving forward for future presentations.
I think it's an excellent idea, and it's actually something we were building out when we did our last bond. So I think we would probably use the same approach, looking at what's coming off versus what's coming on and what the net impact is.
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank the school building committee for their work and continued work throughout the process. Thank you.
Mr. Pearson, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Cambio?
I have no more questions at this time. Thank you.
And I have no questions except a statement that I believe this is, you're doing excellent work. And I'm very proud to be a member of the school committee and a member of this community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Conti, I don't know, we had put on here a review of project deadlines and timeline. I don't know if you want to briefly speak to that next.
Sure. Well, we will continue to work towards our stage 2 submission.
I'm sorry. Thank you. We will continue to work towards our stage 2 submission, which is due February 15th. Prior to that, we will be scheduling school building committee meetings to make their recommendations, school committee meetings for their approval to submit, town council meetings for their approval to submit. We're developing the bulk of the information that we need to include in the RIDE Stage 2. We will continue with our school building committee meetings throughout the holidays. I see we're on track, so I anticipate we will be submitting accordingly.
If I'm a member of the school committee, the town council, or a member of the public, by what date should I get you feedback on what I've seen here today?
Well, I'd probably say within a week.
Okay. All right. And maybe the clerk could share your email with these two bodies so that the way they have it to share.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, Vice President LeBlanc.
Just for the public, for their knowledge, if all goes according to your timeline, what is the expectation for the bond vote?
We will make our submission in February, and the school building authority response usually comes several weeks after that. They may ask for some supplemental information, which we will then provide. And then their approval to the Council on Secondary Education is around in May. At that point, you will know their position on our stage 2 application. Your decision to bond really is up to you. For example, other communities have already had their bond vote and have not yet submitted their stage 2. So that would be a decision for you all to discuss of when you think it would be appropriate. There is one caveat to this, is that before the end of 2023, to maximize your bonus incentives, a couple of things need to be in place, such as you need to be under contract for construction. And that takes various forms, but you will want to keep that in mind. And I'm happy to discuss this further in more detail with the school building committee, and then they can report back.
Okay. I just didn't know if the school building committee had already discussed potential timelines for the bond. That's all.
Not yet. No.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the project deadlines and the timeline from the town council? Mr. Florio, do you want to see if anyone had any questions?
Mr. Mayor, any questions? Mr. Pearson, any questions?
I did. I want you to finish your thought. So you said there are two things that have to be in place, and the first was being under contract for construction. What was the second thing that has to be in place?
Well, the design doesn't have to be done, but the design would be underway and documentation, et cetera.
Thank you. That's it.
Mr. Cambio, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
And I have no questions.
Thank you.
Cool.
I'll now open public comment. Anyone here in council chambers like to make a public comment?
Madam Chair, if I may for a minute. I've heard something that, for those of you who don't know, I've had a fair amount of experience with projects bonded. And there's always, the question comes up, and it can be a conflation between what the town becomes wedded to spend, right, and what you vote for as your bonding capacity. And what I've heard here tonight is we're talking about bonding capacity at 85 million. It does not mean that you'll spend the 85 million. At any point along the way, the council maintains the right to control the roll off on debt service and manage the amount of bonds that it bonds for as these projects are rolled out. That, of course, timeline wise may differ with what the ride process is, and that's the trick, right? And then, of course, as Member Shockley pointed out, there is, when do we bond to mitigate the risk of a rising rate environment, right? So there are those are the three big things to consider. I just point that out a little bit as legal counsel, having been involved in this, but certainly as someone who's been involved in projects of this kind, that's always a question that the public bodies are concerned about. And it's always a question that the public is concerned about. Are we obligated to spend 85 million? No, we're not. But if we don't move in that direction, you lose the capacity to do so for the very reasons that were presented here tonight. So I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in where I could be helpful.
Thank you. Are there any members of Zoom who would like to make a public comment? Sure, bring them in. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. Nick Longo, 5 Autumn Ridge Road. Thank you for taking my comments. I wanted to take just a moment to talk about public engagement, participation. As we know, recently, our consultant for the Community Comprehensive Plan mentioned that there was very low participation in such an important 20-year plan for our community. And tonight, Mr. Conte has mentioned that in his interactive polling, there were very few participants. So my comment is that we get started sooner than later with a public campaign to let the citizens of the town find out and understand this very large project. I feel that there are trust issues in the citizenry, and so this is an important time to get started as soon as possible so that everyone knows the benefits of this very important school project. And then finally, a no vote from the public on this bond issue will certainly throw such an important plan into complete turmoil. So sooner than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Longo. Well said. Are there any other members of the public here on Zoom or here in council chambers that would like to make a comment? Going once, going twice, 3 times. Public comment is closed. Mr. Florio, did you want to close your meeting?
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam President. I like saying that. All those, do I hear a motion to adjourn at 8? What is it?
7:52.
7:52.
I make the motion.
Motion is made to adjourn at 7:52 and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion made.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn this meeting of the Coventry Town Council at 7:53 PM?
Make the motion.
Motion by Vice President LeBlanc,
Second.
second by Councilor Shockley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We are adjourned.